Hi everyone, I'm Darjan from Superdot Studio, and welcome to the 31st edition of On Data and Design. Tonight's topic is very personal to me because I'm a naive optimist. Today we will talk about visualizing for hope. For that reason, I invited some amazing people tonight. We have Pei Ying from The Continentalist, we have Francis from Voilà, and Jose from Easy Database. These folks are doing incredible work and I can't wait to hear from them. Each speaker will have about 20 minutes for their talk. Feel free to submit your question on Slido. The link should be shown up below. We'll be getting to your questions after the talks. Tonight, my special thanks goes to Foundation Botnar for supporting this session. Foundation Botnar works with and for young people's well-being towards a world that fulfills their rights and supports their well-being. One more thing, I don't know if you are aware, but On Data and Design opened a new networking and collaborating community. We meet with the collaborating members to talk about industry challenges and create industry standards for information design. With your financial support, all of our work is possible. Thank you for that. Our next collaborating session is happening already next week on the topic of why visualizations matter. If you're interested, join us at ondataanddesign.com/membership. So maybe you can be with us next week too. Thanks everyone for your support and being here virtual with us. It means a lot. And now, Francis, I take you to the stage and the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Arjan. Thank you, and here we go. You confirm that when you see my screen?
Yes, here we go.
We do. Very good.
Okay.
Thank you so much for inviting me. My name is Francis Gagnon. I am an information designer, and I'm the founder of Voilà, an information design agency active since 2013 and based in Montreal, Canada. We work in French and English. There's a team of 6, and we also have collaborators. What's important today is to know that we are focused all of our projects on sustainable development. So projects in environment, sustainable social development, and governance. This is our raison d'être. This is the reason that we exist. And we want to help our clients make the world better. This is why our mission is that we help people with important ideas to make themselves understood. I'm very, very grateful. It's also personal to me. I'm very grateful to be here because this topic of hope is very close to my heart. I nurture my own hope and I hope to cultivate it also in other people. I consider myself a cautious optimist, or what Hans Rosling would call a probabilist. And mostly I consider that hope is a responsibility. And this is actually my overall message to you. Hope is something that is expected of you as citizen and as a person. If we want the world to get better, we need to hope. Our thoughts, our words, our actions, they all have consequences. Whether you hope or not has consequences. Whether you speak up or not has consequences. Whether you act on this hope has consequences, because the world is real. The world is lived. It is shaped by people, and you are people. Giving up on hope is giving up on people. We rely on each other. We live in the world of hope. I was asked to present examples from our portfolio and show how we can find hope in different data sets. What I want to show you today is how we at Voilà practice and spread hope as information designers. I have developed a framework to present my thoughts. It is structured around time. So let's get started. So hope can come from the past. Hope also is present with us, and hope takes us into the future. Let's get started with the past. So I'm presenting you first a chart that is not from Voilà, but that is from World in Data, and from Gapminder, and it's a global income distribution over time. And you see that in 1850, it was mostly below the international poverty line. You have 4 regions here in 4 colors, but most of them were below the international poverty line. Recently, in 2000, most of Asia was below, but the other regions were moving up. And we expect that in 2100, it's going to have moved for most of the people above the international poverty line. Now, my question to you is, do you believe this is possible? If you even had a hint of a doubt, I have good news for you because this chart is fake. It's not the data that is fake in it, it's the dates that are wrong. This has all already happened. So by 2015, most people were already living in the middle and were above the international poverty line. Massive, massive improvements. But it's normal that you have doubts, and it's normal that we have a somewhat pessimistic view of the world. We have this impression that hunger is going up, that children are dying, they're working, we don't have enough to feed everyone, people are getting sick, they're not connected enough. And this is what the media magnifies because this is what attracts our attention. But actually, those charts I have inverted. It's actually the opposite. The harvest is going up, the yield is going up, immunization, internet is going up too, hunger, children dying, child labor, all of these things are going down. And so there is evidence that things are getting better, and it is worth presenting it and talking about it. So let's look at the first example from our portfolio. This one is from a program that helps teenage girls to exercise more. And this program called Filles Actives has been in operation for several years. Now they conducted a scientific study to see if it works, and it came out with a lot of good news. For instance, in a survey of school observers, they saw that in 74%, there's an improvement in confidence of the abilities of the teenage girls. They improve their self-perception and body image. They overcome past experience. They decrease their fear of being judged. And oh, by the way, the circles on the right are also charts, and they're supposed to represent the wheels of the skateboard. But this is a lot of good news, and I'm very happy that we got to work with this kind of data, because one thing that we do to create hope is to show the good news in our graphs. I actually like this climate chart as well, that is about changes in greenhouse gas emissions in Canada. If we zoom on the historical part on the left, like this, so 2005 to 2023, we see that the emissions went down from 762 megatons to 664. But also to understand those three arrows is to see more good news as well, because what went up is the GDP and the population growth. So it's more people getting wealthier, and we have used less energy per unit of activity, and we have less emissions also per unit of energy. So we're getting more efficient, we're decarbonizing, we're getting wealthier, and there are more people as well, which is good news if you like people. So it all makes these future scenarios all the more plausible, the future scenarios on the right, when we know that we have done it in the past. If you like good news, I have a few books to recommend. Factfulness from Hans Rosling, professor of global health in Sweden. He has died in 2017, and this book was published the following year posthumously, and it's full of data showing that things are better than you think. And the one in the middle by Hannah Ritchie from Our World in Data is showing that there is a path to a sustainable planet, that there are reasons to be hopeful. And the one on the right by Stefan Sagmeister, a well-known graphic designer, is more artistic, and his take on data visualization is unusual, but he has a lot of interesting data about how now is better than before. The next thing that we do at Voilà is to show the counter examples. So when we find negative in comparisons, it means that there is something good to compare it with. So we try to show this, we don't exclude it. This is an example about unequal access to public transportation in Montreal. So we made this chart by hand, putting the dots at the proportional distance from the destination. So this is the starting point. That I've circled there, and the destination here would be downtown Montreal. And the length of the line represents the time it takes to get there. Often the line is longer, and we need to twist and turn it to fit in the space, and that's what we call the winding path. So what you can see is that in the east of Montreal, it takes a long time to cover short distance by public transportation, as opposed to the west, where you can do it really much faster. And so we want to compare this, but we also want to show that it's possible that we're not stuck with this system here, that we can have faster public transportation. Another example of things that can be good, that counter examples, is this infographic about the Canadian communities that are most at risk of losing jobs in the climate transition. The one that needs the most help are at the top here, and but there is also good news actually. By the same measure, 90% of Canadians who live communities that are less vulnerable, are not particularly susceptible to this transition. So their jobs are safe from this. So it means that not everyone is facing this problem, and that we can concentrate our resources to those that need most help. This is for the past. Now I want to talk about the present and see how the present can give us hope. First, let's show the composition of the data. Sometimes we show averages that can be a little less hopeful, but actually the average is hiding a lot of data, such as in this example on the quality of home care for the elderly. I haven't translated everything, it's fairly complex, but what you can observe for now is that there is a performance achieved that is on the left weak, on the right excellent, and most of the average for all the measures are between weak, adequate, and a little bit of good. So this can look like bad news, but when you reveal the underlying distribution, what you realize is that a lot of them, in fact, 2/3 of the measures have at least one top performer. So it means that it is possible to achieve this level of care with the resources. So there is good news, there is hope. Another example, this one is about the economic dynamism of the US economy for a period of 30 years. And so you see the average at the top that is getting a bit negative. So it goes from the blue, that means higher, to red, that means lower. But when you look at the map, it reveals various trends. Some of them are negative. Yes, there are regions with worse than average performance, but there are also regions with better than average performance. And we show them. They represent opportunities. Now, speaking of the opportunities, there are some things in our present that already work, that can be done and implemented. And I'm thinking on the technical aspect of heat pumps. Heat pumps to heat and cool our homes are extremely efficient. They transfer more energy than they consume. They are fantastic both for the environment and for our comfort. So we worked on this heat pump calculator that helps people in Canada especially see how much it would cost for them to operate a heat pump in their house. And the good news is that in a lot of cases, it's actually cheaper and better for the environment and more comfortable for people who live in those houses. So we want to highlight those existing opportunities right now to improve our world. But there are also some things that are not with us, but that will be soon, and I call that the existing future. A lot of the things that are part of our future are already decided now. You can think of the buildings that are going to be built next year, already approved, designed, financed probably by now. The fashion of next summer has already been decided, and even the music that some of us are going to listen in a couple of months has already been recorded this summer as well. So it is a bit the same thing for a lot of future improvements. There are a lot of projects that are already launched, policies that are being adopted and are about to come into force. And we have worked on a climate dashboard for the Canadian Climate Institute that shows just that. So this is the total greenhouse gas emissions for Canada. You see the past, a bit of a projection, and it reveals a gap. Actually, there's 109 megatons there to get on track with the net zero pathway. But if you look on the right, you see that this represents only what has already been legislated. There are policies that are being developed right now, and that would take us to 65. And there are policies that have been announced already, and that would take us to 42. And there are suggested fixes to those policy interactions that would take us to 26.9. So this is all work that is in the making. and not yet revealed, but it shows a 75% reduction in this gap between the projection and the net zero pathways. So even if it's not visible right now, it's the kind of things that are going to kick in very soon as we make progress. We are not the only ones to do this as well. This is an example from Our World in Data, and you see that not only do they have current policies, but they also have pledges and targets that hint at where we could go with what is being discussed right now. So that was the past and the present. Now let's look at the future to find hope. First thing that we do at Voilà is try to identify and highlight what we call the quick wins. What is it that we can do easily that will deliver good results? We talked a little bit about it in the heat pumps, but this time it's for the future. The following chart is about the impact of the climate transition on various economic sectors. So you see three groups here. So to explain the chart, the higher green points means the better impact of the transition on profitability of a sector. In the first case, it's biofuels. And the orange one is the minimum impact that it's going to have, or the worst impact that it's going to have, if you will. So it means that those on the left are only going to have positive impacts from the climate transition, and they present a clear opportunity. And so we isolate them, we label them as well to draw the attention to those kind of opportunities that can be seized. In the middle, potential opportunities means we have to make the right choices, but in some cases there is almost no opportunity, and we're thinking about coal mining, of course. It's not something that's going to come back after the climate transition. Another example here, this is a classic, the cost abatement chart. It's not something that we have invented, but we have adapted it for our clients, CPP Investments. In this case, it's more conceptual. You can imagine that each of those boxes represents an opportunity, a policy, a project, something like this. The width of each of the boxes represents the abatement potential, so namely the emission reduction. So the wider the box, the more emission reductions. And the height of the box represents its cost. And when it's negative, it means that it creates positive cash flow. So that means that every blue box on the left is going to not only reduce emissions, but also generate income. So this is also something to be hopeful for, because you're going to find easily a market. You will have the engine of profit there to contribute to a better world. Now, another thing that we do at Voilà is to show this better future that is often coming out of the research of our clients. An example is the shift to cleaner energy. In this case, we're talking about the role of electricity versus natural gas, gasoline, and biomass. So as of 2023, it was only 23%, but what is planned here is to reach 96% in 2050. So this creates a goal, if you will, to a target for the policies as well, and identifying the needs and the opportunities. And as you can see from this design, we're not subtle about it, and we drew very much attention to this potential positive development. Another thing also is to show the alternatives, the novel path that we can take if a door is closing. There may be a solution is no longer available. A habit needs to change. So at the moment, for Canadians, the American trade partner is no longer reliable. It doesn't mean that people have to lose their jobs. It means that there are other trade partners. So we prepared this chart with our client, the Canadian Climate Institute, too. And in pink at the bottom, you see the Canadian copper exports to the United States. And it seems to be like a big part of our exports. But it's taking a little bit of perspective on this and realizing that there's not only the United States, there's the European Union, other countries, and China, and all of these things can even get bigger. They are going to get bigger and provide even more opportunities too. Next one is to focus on the positive, not only show it, but also focus on it. If there is something positive in your data set, bring attention, make it the takeaway message. You can even put it in the title. So in Canada, for instance, we're going to build a lot of houses, but if we don't build them in the right places, some of them will be destroyed by flood and fires. And that's what our client was studying. So we created those charts and those presentations and start with a title that says that building a small proportion of new homes on safer grounds would reduce new flood damages by almost 80%. And the chart goes like this: 5.8 million new homes by 2030, 10% exposed to flooding under existing policies, and only 3% of them would account for 78% of losses. So maybe we cannot move 5.8 million houses. We don't even have to, but if we focus on those 3%, at least we are going to have great savings. And finally, and this is my pet topic, but I have an idea about what the data visualization community can do for a better world. And I believe that we should be leaving X because it supports violent ideology, it destabilizes democracy, it weakens the vulnerable, it does not value our content. And I believe that our participation to this platform has consequences. So if we don't do it for ourselves, we do it for the victims. And there are other communities like LinkedIn, Blue Sky, Instagram, on data and design even. So let's get rid of X, I believe. So to summarize, this is the framework. Hope is fed by the past, the present, and the future. And it's normal that you might be discouraged sometimes. You don't hope to fix something that is perfect. It's normal to have frustrations, problems, aspirations. Don't shy away from them. Don't hide them. For some people, it is what will motivate them. But we also need to hope, and we know to give hope as well. So I will give the final word to someone much more much more eloquent than me. I'm sorry you cannot have the sound, but it's all subtitled. So, Ms. Codon. That's it. Nothing to add for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Wow. Amazing. Really, 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 really inspiring. Okay. So, Francis, so we will collect the questions. That's kind of for everyone. I see in YouTube there are a lot of hellos from all over the world. So, Francis, you had people watching from Germany, so Germany, Vienna, Zurich, up to Toronto, even India. So all over. I would ask all these people to ask questions you would like to have answered by Francis in the end. So after these three talks, we will have, as I said, the discussion. So please write your questions, upvote other questions. So feel free. So we have good questions for then after the third talk. And now we would take Jose to the stage. And thank you, Francis. Jose, you're muted. Okay, here we go.
Hi.
Yeah, here you are. Good. So your slides, or your screen.
Yes.
Good. Cool. Here we go. And I'm out.
Okay. So thanks for the invitation. I'm Jose Duarte. I'm a designer. I'm a founder and director of Easy Database. We are based in Bogota, and what we do since 2009 or 2010 was to explore the relationship between data and people uh, from a playful, analog, and participatory approach. We have done lots of projects in the past 18 years. This is one of them. This is a very early project we did in 2009. And we have done lots of interventions in public space because it's part of what our essence to work with people to make data close to people using public space. So let's talk about hope. So to start to talk about hope, let me start talking about a thing that happened here in Latin America. That the year was 2019, and start a huge mobilization in social mobilization in Chile that was contagious, and other countries all around South America start to mobilize um, in their countries. Here in Colombia, I'm based in Colombia, as I told you. There was like 6 months of protests and mobilizations, and some of them were very violent in some cases. So for us, it was very important because we are very curious about these kind of phenomenons. Try to understand why people was mobilizing, why people was going to the streets to say what they wanted. And so we did a couple of interventions in public space. This was one of the first one. We did a small card, and we start to ask to the people about the motivations, the fears they had behind the mobilization. So this was a very simple intervention, and here we start to understand what was happening behind. Then we did a second intervention. This one was also very simple. We start to ask to the people about if they feel if they feel optimistic or pessimistic about their future. So we ask if they see the glass empty, half empty, or half full. And then we have a lot of conversations with the people about how they see the future, if they feel optimistic or pessimistic. And at the end, this was a project that we did in collaboration with a couple of companies here in not only in Colombia, but in Latin America. We went out for 6 months in many cities all around Latin America. I think it was like 10, something like, I don't know, 10 or 8 cities, something like that, to talk to the people about that, about the future. If you feel optimistic or pessimistic, trying to inviting them to imagine the world in 2030. That was 10 years in advance. So what we did was to go out, talk to the people. We had something like 2,000 conversations. So we designed some participatory experiences to collect perceptions of the people about this. We talk with all kinds of people in many categories. For example, if you feel optimistic or pessimistic about finance or social issues or health, that kind of stuff. We even did workshops in many cities just to really understand the motivations and the feeling of people about their future. Um, and this is what we found. So let me show you what we found with that process. So okay, so let me show you what we found when we asked people about the world in 2030. Remember that we asked that question in 2020. So 10 years, 5 years before from now. So this person that I'm drawing here represents all the people we talked to. Remember, almost 2,000 interviews, conversations in Latin America. First thing, most of the people were sad, frustrated, for example, maybe hungry, and definitely they were hopeless about their future, about the world, the future of the world. And the main reason was they were, or they feel they were unable to imagine the future. So the word imagination was very important here. Because if you can't imagine a different future, you can't build a different future. You can create a different future, and you can change your present. So this was a very important thing to understand, that the pain that people have, that was they feel unable to imagine a better future for them. So why they feel like this? So there are a lot of reasons that we found in that study, but let me show you 4 reasons. The first one was it's hard to people to imagine the future because it's noisy, it's not clear, it's too far. It's difficult to think, what are you going to do the next hour? Now imagine if I ask you about the future in 10 years. So that was the first part. The second part that I find out very interesting is that most of the people was optimistic about their personal or individual future. For example, if I ask you about yourself or your family in 10 years, probably you are going to ask, we are going to be better. But when we ask about not the personal future, but the collective future, for example, if I ask about your city or your country, people usually answer as a pessimistic answer. No, we are going to, we are now bad. The scenario is not good, so the future is going to be worse, something like that. So that was the second insight of that process. The third one was something like, it's difficult for the people to imagine a better future because they don't even understand their present, their today. So if I can understand the world where I'm living today, it's too hard to understand the world in 10 years. And the fourth thing was maybe something like related with agency. So people feel that they couldn't change the future. It's not it's not possible for them as individuals to change their own future. So this is a thing for agency. People felt they didn't have agency, and felt how do you say this, powerless. Now, how is this related with data? That is an important question here. It's because, let me draw here data. It's because with data, we can help people to get a clearer image of the future, and really see the possibilities. But to go there, you have to transit a path from help them to see the present. So this is a thing of, this is a question from for access. For example, here in Colombia, half of the population have no direct access to internet. So this is a big problem, because if you want to share data with other people, at least in Colombia, and you use only digital channels, half of the population probably can't access that information. So this is a very important thing to discuss as a design and visualization community. What it means to really help people to see the data, to understand better and see clearer the future of the world. The second thing was to understand the second part of the path, understand, help to the people to understand, to really understand their context, their world, their present. It's not enough to give to the people the data, to bring data in books and videos and data visualizations. I think it's really important to try to make sure to take an additional step to make sure that people is really understanding the data. I have tons of examples of this, but it's something like, it's different that you give to the people data about inflation, for example, and a different thing is that you really are sure that people are understanding the implications of inflation or the meaning of the concept of inflation. So the thing here is about literacy. And the last step of this path, I think it could be about agency. And agency is making sure that people are not just seeing the data or understanding the data, but they know what to do with the data, and they share the data with their communities, and they work with the data with the communities, and they imagine possibilities, trying to playing with the data. So this is about trust. This is about share data. This is about understand why the data make me powerful, and why can I take or make decisions with data. So when you travel or you walk this path, you help people first imagine the possibilities, see the possibilities, understand the possibilities, feel that they can change the future, and then imagine a different scenario. And then we get hope. Hope is at the end of this. You only can have hope if you are able to imagine a different future, and data can help us to do that. So what is our responsibility as visualizers or designers or data communicators? I think it's like a call to action, I guess, an invitation to our community to try to understand data not as mirrors that show us the picture of today, but try to understand data as doors that show us the possibilities of the future. So let me show you with an example what I mean when I say this. A couple of years ago, we worked in a book with a president here in Colombia that was called An Optimistic Message to the World. And part of the book that was inspired in part with Steven Pinker was this. This was the first question in the book. Would you think Colombia, we are now better in Colombia than 30 years ago? And the people answered yes or no. And then the book was about to confirm and show you that maybe your answer is right, or show you that you are wrong. And what we found is that usually people, for example, in this example, that because the book was, the first chapter was about perception. So when we ask about if people think that the fight to poverty is getting worse, most of the people in Colombia felt that way. 72% are pessimists about getting better about poverty. But when you go to the data show you a different path. In that year that was 2020, something like that, 2019, in this case 2018, the poverty rate was 27%, and that's a very high poverty, of course. But the thing here is that, and this is the challenge here, is that if you only see that data, you are seeing a mirror of that moment. But the real challenge is to try to find the path, because if you find the path, you may see that in 2000, for example, the poverty was 55%. So we reduced the poverty in a half, more than a half. And why is that important? And why is that important for hope? Because if you see the data here, 27%, you are seeing the picture. This is the mirror that I told you. But if you can see this data, you maybe can see the projection, the possibilities here. This is possible. We can do that because we did this before. So this is the first thing. It's hope here. We can get here or here. This is the first thing. But the second thing is that you can understand the things you did here, what actions you did here that reduce poverty, and you can replicate this in here to get here. So hope and see the data as doors is not only about speculation. It's more about find the actions and make sure to replicate that actions to make sure that you get there where you really want to be. So the power of data here is that allow us to imagine a better future, of course, give us tool to knowledge, agency, and eventually even change our reality. I know that it seems that as a huge purpose, but it's possible. When you transit the path and finally see the data not only as mirrors as that present you the present that usually is not good or sometimes not good, but you can see as a door, as a possibilities, as a possibility of the future, then you see hope. So to close my intervention, let me show you a project that we did a couple of months ago. We did an sculptures that represent that idea. As you can see here, these sculptures have two pieces. So the first one, for example, represent the poverty in Colombia in 2000, and in 2000, the year 2000, and the second circle represent the poverty in Colombia in 2020, 20 years later. And we did the same exercise using different data to show as a gift to give to our clients, our collaborators, an example of how Colombia and the world is getting better. It's a reminder, a daily reminder. Finally, sometimes, because I show you the example of the book, but I would like to show you a very common example. I talked to you about inflation. So this was an intervention we did in public space for the past year. We did like 20 of those interventions in different places around the country, and this was an intent to make people not just understand the concept of inflation, but try to make a better use of their money using the data, so they get hope because they can save money. So this was an intervention with that purpose. Here, for example, what I trying to say here is in that installation of inflation, first we give to the people data. Then we make sure people really understand the data we give them. So this is literacy. Then we show you how can they use the data we gave them about inflation. So, for example, how can they make decisions in the shopping, and then they can imagine a strategy to save money, and then they have hope. So, as you can see in an example, a simple example of this one, even in a simple example as this one, people can feel hope when share and really understand data. And that's it. Thank you.
Super. Thanks a lot, Jose. It was really, truly an intervention what you did. Really nice. Um, for all the folks who liked Jose's intervention, don't forget to upvote the video. We need support. We like your support. I also see that there are some nice questions coming up for the next session. And not to lose time, Pei Ying, I would bring you here now to the stage.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jose. And your screen.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you. Great. Hi, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I've been fans of the works of the presenters before me. My name is Pei Ying, and I'm the head and co-founder of Continentalist. And today I'll be sharing about how we've attempted in the last, especially the last 2 years, to tell all of our data stories or projects with principles of care, embracing complexity and resisting extraction. My presentation is not specific to hope, as the two presentations before were, but I will share ideas that will help us look at our world with a sense of, I guess, a solution and abundance. I started Continentalist in 2017 with the simple ambition to tell data stories from Asia, about Asia, from our perspective. We saw ourselves as bridges between the research sector and the public. Since then, we've published over 100 pieces. Here's a sample of the work that you'll see on our website, which we are best known for. That said, we also have great content available on Instagram and LinkedIn, which we call micro stories, where we bring all of our work to where our audience is at. Lesser known is the work we produce as a studio for our clients that are of a similar vein. But today I'm here to share about how we've evolved our ethos to one that values reciprocity, not just as a principle, but methodological working process, and why we did so and what we've learned from this new practice. For the majority of our company's lifespan, our work looked largely like this. Long form, evergreen, visually charged, and beautifully illustrated essays that discusses a variety of issues about Asia. We've had the great honor of collaborating with many organizations across the globe, big and small, to tell stories that drive awareness to critical issues around social justice, climate change, nature and conservation, and so on. Integral to many of our pieces is this belief that our work has to be centered in an Asian and local perspective, using data to do myth-busting work, or provide dignity and representation to cultures where mainstream media has failed to do so. I'm proud to share that this body of work has won several awards and recognition from various communities, but it still left us feeling off and disconnected very often. That was because we were telling stories from a distance, where we were not always in direct contact with the communities that we reported on and relied on others to tell us what to say, or we prioritized deadlines and visual brilliance. Ultimately, we realized that data will always be entangled with people. It is not a neutral nor naturally good form of knowledge, and decisions made from data affects humans, their bodies, and communities. Talking about community without engaging meaningfully felt hollow, so we needed to figure out how to build an ethical, values-driven practice. As a result, we knew our mission and vision had to evolve towards equity and care. Our old mission and vision was built around this ambition to redress misconceptions about our cultures and continent. Too often, we felt that news about our part of the world is dominated by a negative lens. Natural disasters, poverty, corruption, frivolity, exoticization, just to name a few. If only people knew what exactly was happening and help people communicate their data was what we thought would solve the problem. But our new reflections forced us to interrogate these assumptions, which made it clear that it was no longer relevant or appropriate for what we wanted to do. We needed one that made us review our relationship with data, research, and communities, and most importantly, who we center in our stories. So in our new vision and mission, we now see ourselves as advocates for a more equitable world that fosters connections between Asia's sources of knowledge. We see ourselves as a conduit to support others, and we want to challenge data dynamics with both data and human experiences. But let me come back to the issue which we started out as an organization to address. How do we practice good data storytelling in Asia that centers communities that stories are about? Our experience informs us that there are many barriers. The usual resources that I try to learn from, books, conferences, and courses on data visualization, does not prepare me for the realities in our region. Firstly, data literacy is not great. This is even true in a place like Singapore, a country where a significant proportion of our population has at least tertiary education. They might understand what average means, but few question why it's problematic. Most of the data visualizations we use today are also strongly associated with research and white-collar work. In many parts of Asia, especially in places with significant educational and income inequalities, Eurocentric, or what we know now as conventional data viz, is foreign. With a continent spanning all sorts of languages and billions of people, there is no general data storytelling or data viz guidelines that is sufficient. Asia also has unique challenges to open data and freedom of information legislation. Most of the countries rank below 50% on the Open Data Index, and only a quarter of the countries have laws around freedom of information. And this brings me to my next point about power imbalances of information. This is not to say that data doesn't exist. It does, but it's not granular enough to make critical, it often isn't granular enough to make critical commentary. And in many parts of Southeast Asia, the data isn't even shared in a form that's usable. It's usually in a JPEG image. So there is also lastly distrust in data. In many countries, especially with more authoritarian regimes, data is used to serve state agendas. So people are very distrustful. A few years ago, I was on this leadership program for Southeast Asians, and I recall being so struck by how many of my fellow participants told me that they had false birth dates on their official documents. For even something as benign as birthdays, people avoid data surveillance. How can we presume any accuracy at all? Perhaps the problem isn't in what Asian societies lack, or we're looking at the issue with the wrong problem lenses, so to speak. The problem lies in the fact that data and data viz comes from modern Western-centric development that is a long history of colonization. This practice of acquiring full or partial political control over another country for economic exploitation may feel like a thing of the past, but in reality it isn't. Its ghost lingers on in coloniality, which is this long shadow that mostly colonial and European powers have left in their wake across the world, and continues to do so not only informing structures of trade, economy, and labor, but most crucially, knowledge and how knowledge is produced. As this quote illustrates, coloniality lives on in the ways we treat data, the cash crop commodity of this 21st century. Data now replaces what used to be spice, cotton, or coffee. The systems and perspectives we have towards data today is fraught with this desire for comprehensibility. Knowledge or data is only legitimate if it's properly usable, or properly usable if it's been verified and legitimized by institutions such as governments, organizations, and universities. And this ignores the legitimacy of other forms of knowledge, especially indigenous ones, that are equally valuable and insightful. So we need to stop thinking of data as this form of ideal knowledge. Data was invented in this modern life as a way to make our world legible to those with power. But in reality, it is an imperfect, flawed representation of our reality. Categorization and standardization is applied to ease our cognitive understanding, to make life on Earth manageable, searchable, and then usable. This process erases diversity and individuality. Data is inherently fraught with power dynamics. Who is collecting the data versus whose data is being collected? For what purpose and to what gain is it being done? Those with data wield power and knowledge. How can we reverse this dynamic or challenge it? The truth is there is no method or perfect approach to this, and it takes a lot of self-reflection and unlearning of long-held ideals and conceptions. And I will discuss a few ways we've approached this and what we have learned from it. The first is to reject this need for accuracy or certainty. In centering local knowledge and beliefs, this means not simply looking at mythical and spiritual practices as superstition or without scientific basis and merit. Instead, we treat these beliefs as reality and collect data around them as points of culture worth celebrating and acknowledging. For example, we've talked about feng shui and its origins and how these principles inform our built environment. We also looked at a spatial dataset about supernatural encounters and reframed how we look at our landscape. Neither of these would be considered accurate, but not on a scientific level at least, but our perspective is that they are just as worthy. The next is to challenge reductivism and to consider diversity, nuance, and the agency of every individual, especially in your datasets. We also aim to design with visual metaphors, imbuing emotion and dignity into our work and our stories to show that people are more than just numbers. On the left is one of the visualizations from a story we did about women and how they access leisure and how varied their experiences with leisure are with distance and time. Using an average to represent this would have significantly glossed over the individual barriers and experiences. On the right is a cultural infographic we developed for the Malay Heritage Center in Singapore. Malays are an indigenous group that is often represented in simplistic and essentialist ways, and it was important for us to design food and tradition without this exoticized lens and instead with dignity, beauty, and joy. We also have sought to center indigenous voices and experience when we work with them and use their knowledge systems as a source of design approach. In this story, Gaza lives resisting cultural genocide. It was vital for us to center Palestinians and their experiences in this project. We were essentially outsiders to this topic, so we had to partner with Visualizing Palestine and follow their lead. Our story must center Palestinian voices, so we dedicated a chapter to interviews with 5 Palestinian cultural practitioners from Gaza. These were snippets of their lives and work, showing how they are embedded in Gaza's urban and cultural fabric. For the main data visualizations, we wanted to show the scale of cultural loss in Gaza. For this, we were inspired by Palestinian designer Maya Amr, who used Tetris or Palestinian embroidery to represent the number of martyrs in the ongoing genocide. This is a dignified way of visualizing deaths instead of simply showing numbers. We asked for her permission to use her designs and expanded on the Tetris symbols for our story. Our approach to this story was heavily influenced by this quote, introduced to us by Nur, a researcher from Visualizing Palestine. To see the culture that is built is in exile recognized and celebrated in spite of its subjection to injustice, suffering, and humiliation. We felt that the mainstream press had done a sufficient job belaboring the death and destruction that has gone on in Gaza, and our contribution should be beyond this extractive pile-on where we only talk about their pain and not their joy. Palestinians and Gazans should be known and heard beyond their suffering, and even their pain should be discussed with dignity. We have also prescribed ourselves a different way and process of working in our creative process. In this example of Air Pasang Surut, a participatory exhibition we did for Hari Orang Pulau, also known as Islanders Day, a day of celebration for indigenous seafaring peoples hailing from Nusantara, the region that is today Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore. This exhibition was co-designed by us and Orang Laut Singapore, an advocacy organization for the indigenous peoples of the sea. Orang Laut Singapore is no stranger to us. We've worked with them on a couple of projects before. They're also our neighbors in the same co-working space in Singapore. It might be easy to assume that we already know their work, or their pain points and their objectives. But instead, we took a slow approach. We discussed our shared objectives for this project over traditional kueh and tea, and we took care to emphasize the spaciousness and relationship building and principles of collective care. And for the exhibition, we borrowed and upcycled materials and props and conducted trial runs with them, getting their feedback about what worked and what wouldn't. This exhibition was intended as a first step of a research project to capture the effects of displacement on the Orang Laut community and other coastal communities in Singapore who have been evicted from their islands. Initially, we thought that Islanders Day would be a great opportunity to collect data since it's a gathering space for the community. But we also quickly realized that the space was celebratory in tone, and asking people for hard data about displacement might sort of strike the wrong note. Taking inspiration from principles of abundance and opting not to frame displacement only in the deficit, we designed the exhibition prompts to be open and fluid, revolving around maps, memories, and thoughts about their first home. Some prompts with a focus on embodied knowledge and memories include: what sounds do you associate with your first home? What's a dish you remember eating? Or what words describe your relationship to the sea? Our exhibition focused on celebrating what the community has and being a space for their stories and sharings. So, in a way, our research objectives became secondary. Of course, we've not lost sight of our longer term aims, which is to conduct a deeper research into displacement and its effects in the future, information that is important for Orang Laut Singapore's advocacy work as well. But for the purposes of this exhibition, we did not want to have an extractive relationship with both the data we collect and the community that we are taking from. We didn't want to take what we are looking for data-wise and then leave. For us, it was important chance to build trust. Orang Laut narratives have been largely erased from the state, and forced displacement and assimilation into wider Malay community has led to disempowerment and marginalization of their culture. So it's very important for us to embark on a research and data collection exercise where we don't inadvertently reinforce extractive practices. Collecting more data doesn't correct this problem, as it can lead to further intellectual exploitation of indigenous narratives with no sustained material betterment to their lives. We've also been drawing on indigenous methodologies for our own approaches, as we did in one of our newest works, a line of our own drawing. This is a work commissioned by the Singapore Art Museum that responds to an art installation by an artist called Tan Pin Pin that's about walking as a social action. So for this, we decided to explore the theme of desire paths. Desire paths are these unofficial paths we find in fields or grassy areas created by people who want to bypass the so-called official route. So you've probably seen this before. Conventional cartography and mapping tend to view environments as static and controllable. But desire paths are living examples of agency, deviance, and human expressions in the wild. Hence, we felt it was apt to embrace walking as a research method informed by indigenous and decolonial perspectives to research. Although walking is not exclusive to indigenous communities, they hold it as a process for knowledge sharing and counter mapping, believing in embodied experiences to understanding our world. We conducted fieldwork in 4 sites across Singapore and walked in pairs to find desire paths in our chosen sites of study and documented our experience in the following ways. While we had the technical data-focused queries, we also wanted to document our experience and made sure to capture how we felt, what we thought, and even if they were expressions of discomfort or uncertainty or something witty and random. This formed the knowledge that we collected through walking, creating this embodied decolonial and counter mapping experience. So while we were on a mission to gather information, we also prioritized being present with our environment, walking in pairs for solidarity and safety, and remembering to respect the sanctity of space. Going back to this exhibition itself, we incorporated ourselves into the work, where the names of our teams were also printed on the wall as researchers of the respective sites. We annotated the work with our thoughts and feelings, as well as speculations about why certain desire paths formed. Instead of thinking ourselves as separate observers to this phenomenon, we included ourselves explicitly. We wanted to lean onto principles of entanglement and communicated that as our methodology, one that is embodied and necessarily speculative. So what did we learn from this? Building relationships and not transactions. We now have a community manifesto in our team that guides how we hold all of our relationships, be it readers, stakeholders, partners, and clients. And we focus on reciprocity and question sources and power, rather than thinking of community development only as this natural benevolent good. Questioning what is the most valuable intervention. We also always ask now if what we're doing is the right solution or the right intervention for what is at stake. Does this issue or community require yet another story, yet another artwork? Even if the answer is yes, how can we do it in a way that centers their experiences? Lastly, exploring more caring and collective ways to support the work we care about. Creative work produced in pain has little joy, and we want to think about how we can continue what we do with principles of care. So I'll conclude my sharing here with some final questions and reflections to share that might guide your own journey in your work if you find yourself in similar conundrums to us. Who benefits from the data we might collect and share, and who might be harmed or left out? Are we reinforcing extractive practices even unintentionally? What does care look like in our engagements, and how do we stay accountable to the communities whose stories that we are telling about? That's it for my talk, and please follow us on our various social media platforms. Thank you.
Thank you. So, thank you for your very also critical, but I really like it and appreciated your perspective. So let's bring also Francis and Jose to the discussion round. So we are officially done now with the talks part. I just need to make sure, Francis and Jose, that you have the microphone mic on. Yes, good. Okay, so me let me start because I was making some notes for myself. So I got inspired by, I would try to summarize. I know it's not good, but I would try to summarize just one sentence per talk because I really like that for me. So Francis, I would say what my takeaway is that you said that hope is in the details and not in the average. That kind of the average number is showing kind of the negative, and in the detail you see the hope. So that's my good. Thanks. And Jose, what I liked a lot that you said, hope comes at the end. It's a process. Kind of you need to go through a certain process until the hope comes because people have to be able to imagine it.
Mhm.
Good, good, cool. And paying I really liked actually this colonial administration literacy perspective, and actually what my I like really eye-opening thing is that hope needs trust. So kind of people need to be able to trust, then they have hope. Cool. Okay, so um, let me see. I mean, we have really good question. So I will really just start from the first, where the first question says, it's coming actually from Nico, and she said, Francis, I love your approach. How did you make it happen to work only on sustainable development projects? Let me just try to make it more general because I think it's a general question, asking how do you select your clients and how do you finance your projects? And do you really work only on these kind of sustainable development projects or social projects, or are you working also on other projects?
And that's a very good question because I just had the same question last week actually from someone who came to visit us and asked the same thing. Um, So I have maybe an unusual path from this in that it was a career change for me to go in data visualization. So I used to work in what I would call sustainable development. This is where my network was. This is what I was doing with my life. And then I realized that, how much of these solutions are not getting across because people cannot communicate them clearly. They're specialists in it and they understand themselves, but they need messengers, actually. They need people to help them get across. And I realized that I was such a messenger, that I was not necessarily the person to come up with the solutions, but that I could help them to be understood. So to go back to the question of the clients, it came naturally because I had this network initially. And so my colleagues, my former colleagues also saw the value that I was bringing and they were turning to me, and it snowballed over time. And as for the word of mouth has done its job, our portfolio, etc. We attract a certain type of clients. I also think that the strength of having a focus like this is that when you find the client, you feel the match. They're like, I have climate data to represent. They're like, okay, we're meeting here in the place. If you say, yeah, I'm going to represent any data, it's a little bit like less strong, the relationship that you build. And finally, for the selection, I would say that we work like vast majority. I haven't calculated. I would say 90% is sustainable development related, and the last 10% is what I call like neutral clients, like a dashboard for an insurance company. Like that's fine. Like they're not doing anything wrong with that. So often it's a friend of a friend who needs help with it, and so it's a little bit more neutral, but also to understand that sustainable development is wide. It's environment, it's social development, but it's also government. So a lot of what the governments do can fall under this because often they create a public good. Thanks for the question.
Pei Ying, how is it for you with project
Um,
selection?
yeah, we obviously have also many different types of more corporate projects, but we have had I guess, the luck to work on quite a few nonprofit projects, and also had the trust of different heritage institutions or creative institutions like the Singapore Art Museum, who really gave us that intentional space. So there's been a lot of I think we signal what our values are through our stories, and naturally we find a lot of alignment there. We've rarely had to say no to people. I think once we are very clear about what our values are, as a studio, the people who don't align with us don't really come knocking on our doors. But in instances where they have been disagreements, we always come back to, I mean, at least for me, I always come back to valuing my team, their mental health, and what is important in that process, and giving them the right to also decide and choose what they think is valuable, not just to us, but also to the specific work that is being done. So even if, say, the client might be a little difficult in terms of the working relationship, but if we feel that the topic is really important and could benefit from the lens that we will bring in, then we will of course go ahead and work on that. So that's how we handle it.
Cool. Yeah. And Jose?
We usually work with non-profit organizations, and usually the topics are related with the non-profit organizations because they are sometimes against the government politics and that kind of stuff. So usually the topics we work and the companies we work with are social issues. We talk about we work with about food and food policies, health, mental health, for example. Hmm? But yes, it's usually non-profit organizations.
Mm, cool. Good. Good. Okay, let's go to the next second most upvoted question. It's a question to all participants, and it says, in this age of AI, artificial intelligence, misinformation, etc., what helps people to keep trust in data? What's your opinion on this? It's not an easy question.
I think I think it's about involve people in the process. So usually when this is a very important question because usually in the in community of visualizators, some of the people work alone in their computers and they think they are solving some kind of stuff sitting in their office. But what we really have to do is to not only to work for the people or not even work with the people or the community, but work through the community. And that means that you have to involve very consciously the community in every step of the process, not only in the first part or the last part that is validation, but also in the planning, the design, the implementation. And when people or communities feel part of the process, they really understand the process. I think they start to trust in the data because they are being part of the data they are going to share or they're going to use.
And do you, in your process, do you start with given data, let's say from the United Nations or I don't know, CIA World Factbook or something, or do you always go from scratch, empty, and create your data with the audience, with the participants?
It's usually the second. Yeah. It depends on the project, because sometimes you have to start with some data and start the discussion from that point. But sometimes, for example, a project we did a couple of years ago in Belgium was about mobility, and the people that wanted to share the data with their neighbors were the same people that were collecting the data. So we start the discussion with them, with the neighbors, to find out what kind of data they want to share, why, etc.
Get it. Yeah.
I just wanted to contribute to that a little. I think it's actually important that people don't trust data. And I think it's important that they remain healthily skeptical of data that they see, especially, I guess, in regions like Asia where, data is often wielded for maybe not the best reasons. I think intuitively people have a natural distrust where they feel data doesn't align with their reality, which actually I have a lot of admiration for Jose's work, because participatory data visualization is one of those ways to solve those challenges. The more people are able to participate and understand how data is created, the more likely they will, of course, believe it then. And use it for those purposes. And I think part of what we are now advocating for is more of these embodied experiences where we not just give them a chart, but they can download that information really quickly in their minds, but to really interrogate the data point and to, experience it for themselves to better understand what that means. Yeah.
So just to get that back to that, so you don't use data as a conversation starter, so you don't take kind of, let's say, UNAN data. You really start from also, as Jose did, from the scratch. So kind of.
We sort of do a little bit of both.
Yeah.
We sort of use, obviously, top-line data sometimes as a guide to give us a general sense of direction, but we are leaning more towards creating it from scratch, or we call it more guerrilla methods of, data activism. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Well, what I'm going to say is complementary to what they've said, because I really endorse as well the importance of participating to the making of the data. And I think this is something that I observe by people who are skeptical, is they see it as other people are preparing this data and they have their own agenda and they don't understand. And I had the chance in my career to be behind the scene like this and to see how the data is produced and the struggle and the effort to make it good, etc. So I really endorse all of this. What I could add is a bit of my perhaps naive perspective there, but I think that despite the role of misinformation right now, the foundation of our world is still accurate information. We don't necessarily feel it because it grabs the attention a lot, but like, how do we know that the climate is changing? How do we know the price of anything? How do we know the location of people, etc.? There is a lot of this solid information that we take for granted that is there. And so we shouldn't give up, us people who work with data, to communicate it, to put more trust in it, to show people how it can be used. There is this like layer at the top that is very visible right now, and that is a lot of misinformation, and it threatens the foundation as well. I understand why. But I think in our day-to-day life, we rely on a lot of data, and the world that is built around us is built around a lot of trust in the data as well.
Get it. Let's stay here. So, from the process, there were questions, and I think they could be interesting for actually all of you, because there are these projects where you say data activism and that you kind of create the data and you work and participate with people. The question of evaluation and kind of what do you do with that data is kind of the process the main thing, or are there afterwards kind of reports, books, things that you then afterwards visualize and give back to the people who participated, but actually to a wider audience? Jose, that's your direction. So evaluating, reporting on the.
Yes. So okay. First, First, it's important to let know to the people that are participating in this process of collecting data, the purpose of that recollection, because not just because transparency, but because that when people find purpose in the conversation, the conversation is richer, so you have more deep information. So that's the first part. The first part, and the purpose is not necessarily related with a big purpose. Maybe the purpose is only a report that shows what people are thinking about something. So usually, what we do is at the end of this process, we did a report, and we did a video that collects the experience we have. For example, the example I showed you in the first part of my talk, that was in 6 months. We did a short video that explains the whole experience and the conclusions of that information we collect. And sometimes we do an additional step, that is go directly to the people that participate in that process, show the information, and then try to understand if they are aligned with the insights we found with the information. It's something like that.
Okay, so reflecting based on the report, then again with the people. Okay.
And sometimes it's about iteration. For example, in the example of the inflation was very important, not just to give to the people the data and then share the result of the data, and a good practice to save money understanding inflation, but we learn a lot in each intervention. So that information, we use that information to the next one. That was the reason we not only share the results of the intervention, but try to collect what the participants think about not only about the information, but the intervention itself and the interaction, that kind of stuff.
Understood. Pei Ying, do you want to add something regarding that?
I think unlike Jose, like we haven't done as many participatory data projects, but in the one that I referenced in my presentation, the goal of that was really to invite community and provide a space to talk. So collecting the data was less important, because in their perspective, data is this static bit thing. It's a day about celebrating how alive their culture remains despite forced displacement. So it's really jarring to start, focus on, please fill out this form, or, here's a Google link, please, detail it down. That's not what they want to do. They want to celebrate. So we gave them opportunities to write that down. And of course, we collected all of those Post-it notes. But I think to remember that these are still static captures and you're not living things. So we need to hold it with that view that they are just fleeting snapshots, but they're not that important to be collected.
May I add something? When in the past, I don't know, 5 or 10 years, we start to think, I mean, our question when we do an intervention in public space is not anymore like what kind of information we want to collect or what kind of data we want to bring to the people. Is more like, as Pei Ying say, it's something like what is the conversation we want to trigger in this space? What kind of conversation we consider is important this community have, and how data can a good data or a good question can help us to trigger that conversation. So yes, of course, the first thing is to activate communities around data, and then you can collect data if you want.
Yeah. So data is an activator in the end, right? Okay, KP. Francis, did you want to?
Yeah, maybe just honestly, it's.
You muted. Just sorry.
Sorry. It's just my area, but a few thoughts that sprung to mind. It's about the impact of our work. And there is like a general question about, does it make any difference to make a good chart and to present the data, etc., like compared with something. But the second one is, what is the impact that it has on the people And this is what you're saying. And it's funny, it reminds me a lot of the book Living in Data by George Thorpe. It's a fantastic book that I recommend everyone listening here, because he's the one who raised my awareness about this, that, when you reflect data on people, it has an impact on them to see themselves in the data. And I know it, like when we talk about gender inequality, for instance, like we keep telling women that they earn less, that they are less valued, that they are like, and I've started to be like, wow, how is their self-perception affected by this, that like they're learning, is there something else that we can counterbalance? And I think in general, what I hear from the conversation is that data and data visualization is part of a feedback loop. It's not the beginning, it's not the end, it's something that constantly comes back. They're changed by it. We've done only one participatory event, and it was as a climate summit. And we just asked people to put a dot on the matrix, of how this. And what was interesting to me was to see the answers evolve over time the more data there was on the panel. Like the first person may have like become an outlier by the end of the day, because they came like fresh on this and thought, oh, I think like this. But when you arrive at the end of the day and everyone's in the corner, you're like, how would I be different, from this? So it was also a feedback loop that was changing the data as we were going during the day, because people were influenced by what they saw in it.
Super interesting. Super interesting. Okay, so time-wise, we are getting slowly to an end. Let me just have one simple last question, which is directed towards Pei Ying. Alice says, amazing work. I think it's a good question. Do you have any specific books or references to deconstruct or learn about colonialistic prejudices or practices?
There's a lot, and I think my coworkers and I are actually building what we call a decolonial stack. So keep your eyes peeled. Hopefully, we can launch it next year, where we sort of compile our inspirations, readings, so on and so forth, that might be useful for people. But the first, I would say, that has really left a deep impression is Data Feminism. It really is a wonderful book. Highly, highly encourage everyone to read it. It really gives you an insight to how our data structures in the world are not the most fair or equal. The other book that I've come to really love is Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, who's this indigenous botanist and lecturer in America. And she comes from a scientific practice, but she also brings a wonderful indigenous perspective on how we have a better relationship with our world. One is not just based on principles of sustainability, but about living in harmony and again principles of reciprocity. The third key resource that I think is really important to look at is more of like a compilation of resources, but largely from indigenous perspectives. Specifically, we have taken a lot of reference from Maori data sovereignty from New Zealand. They are far more advanced, I guess, in their descriptions of what is data sovereignty to indigenous groups, how they see data as a living thing, what sort of rules there are around it. That has informed a lot of the way we work as well. Yeah.
Super. Thank you. We're looking forward to the resources next year. Super. Okay, good. So for everyone, thank you that you joined. We will close now the live stream. For the speakers, please stay here. And we're saying bye to everyone. Thank you that you joined.